My sister asked me to transfer $9,500 for her emergency. When I declined, she said, "You'll always be the loser with no spine." She then ripped my project binder. I whispered, "You just ruined your own life." Minutes passed, I walked back in, and everyone froze. I'm a 42-year-old woman, and this just happened about 3 weeks ago. I still feel like I'm processing all of it, but I need to write this out. It feels like my whole relationship with my sister just snapped, and this time, for good. Some context first. I live in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm divorced, no kids, and I work as a civil engineer. I've been in the field for almost 18 years now, and I've always had this passion for sustainable infrastructure, things like green city planning, water conservation systems, smart grids. A couple years ago, I started working on a side project, kind of my dream proposal for turning small to mid-sized cities into sustainable hubs. I was doing it entirely in my own time, unpaid, but I was hoping that one day it might lead somewhere. About 2 months ago, I submitted it for review to a partnership between the city council and a private environmental consultancy group. I didn't think much would come of it. But a month ago, I got an email. It was shortlisted. They wanted me to present it. If they liked what they saw, I'd get a contract to help implement a pilot program, with a full-time consulting position attached. Basically, it would change my whole career. The presentation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. The Sunday before, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Just a first name, Iris. "It's Noelle. Please. I need help." We hadn't spoken in over a year. Noelle is my younger sister by 4 years. She's 38. And honestly, we used to be close. As kids, we were basically glued together. But everything changed after our parents divorced. I think I dealt with it by trying to control everything: school, chores, my part-time job. She went the other way. Got into trouble early. Skipped classes, started dating much older guys. By the time she was 20, she'd had her first child, dropped out of college, and was living with a man twice her age. That relationship ended badly, like most of them did. She's been through 2 marriages, 3 kids, a bankruptcy, a stint in rehab, and God knows how many apartments. And I tried to help. I really did. I paid her car loan once. Sent money for school supplies. Let her crash on my couch more than once. But 5 years ago, after she sold a necklace I gave her, something that belonged to our grandmother, for drug money, I cut contact. I told her I needed space. I guess it was only a matter of time before she reached out again. The next text said, "It's for Devin. He broke his arm. No insurance. They won't operate until we pay the full amount. Please, $9,500. I'll pay you back. Please. I swear on my life." Devin's her middle child. Sweet kid. Probably the most grounded of her 3. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't want to ignore it completely. What if it was real? So I called the hospital she named in the voicemail. Yes, she also left a very dramatic one, and after some waiting, a nurse told me they didn't have a patient by that name. Nor any arm surgery scheduled for a child in the last 24 hours. She even double-checked neighboring hospitals. That's when I knew. It wasn't true. Still, I called her. I guess some part of me wanted to give her the chance to explain. Maybe even tell the truth. She didn't. She doubled down. Said the hospital discharged him early. That they needed the money now to schedule a specialist. Then she turned it around, like she always does. Accused me of being heartless. Said I'd abandoned my family. Claimed that just because I had a perfect little job and no kids didn't mean I was better than her. I calmly told her I couldn't send the money. She hung up. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. But about 2 hours later, she showed up at my house. I hadn't seen her in person in over 18 months. She looked rough, gaunt, tense, like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. She walked right in like she still lived there. I told her she needed to leave. She ignored me. Looked around, commented on my furniture. Then her eyes landed on the kitchen table. My binder was sitting there, my entire presentation, printed, bound, annotated. Color-coded tabs. Fold-out maps. This thing had taken months. She picked it up and started flipping through it, smirking. "This what you're working on instead of helping your family?" I didn't answer. I just walked over and held out my hand. "Give it back, Noelle." She didn't. She looked at me with this awful mix of contempt and satisfaction. Like she'd been waiting years for this exact moment. "You'll always be the loser with no spine," she said. And then she tore it. Not just a page. She grabbed the whole binder, pulled the rings apart, and ripped the spine in half. Pages flew. Notes fell everywhere. She knocked my coffee over in the process. It spilled across 2 of my maps. I didn't even yell. I just stood there. For once, I wasn't angry. I felt cold. Like something in me just disconnected. I looked her right in the eyes and whispered, "You just ruined your own life." Then I walked out. No plan. No keys. Just left my own house, got in my car, and drove. After 15 minutes, I parked in the lot of a Hy-Vee and stared at the dashboard. My hands were still shaking. But after a while, my brain kicked into gear. I remembered I had digital backups. Scans of the maps. Notes in Google Docs. It wouldn't be perfect, but maybe I could rebuild it. I called the only person I thought might actually help, my old college professor and mentor, Nadine, who still lived nearby. I hadn't spoken to her in almost a year. When she picked up, I told her everything. She didn't even hesitate. "Bring everything you've got. I've got a printer, coffee, and a full night ahead of me." And that's exactly what we did. We stayed up till almost 4 a.m. reprinting, reorganizing, annotating. She helped me rebuild the whole binder, even made a few design tweaks I wouldn't have thought of. By sunrise, it wasn't just back, it was better. I went home, showered, changed, packed everything up again. And I walked into that City Hall conference room like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just lost it all 12 hours before. And here's where things got strange. As I walked in, I noticed something off. The staff at the front desk were whispering. One of them pointed toward the window. I turned and saw Noelle, standing just outside the glass. Screaming into her phone. Her hair was messy. Her face was blotchy. Security was approaching her. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did. I didn't stop to find out. I walked past like she was just another stranger on the sidewalk. Inside the room, I greeted the panel. Laid out my binder. Took a breath. Everyone went silent. The moment I started speaking, the room changed. It was like flipping a switch, my nerves evaporated, my voice found its rhythm, and I was completely in the zone. I wasn't even thinking about Noelle or the chaos that had unfolded the night before. I was talking about what I knew, what I loved, what I'd poured years into. The proposal focused on retrofitting aging infrastructure in smaller Midwestern cities like Janesville and Wausau. Things like stormwater filtration systems, converting old parking structures into vertical gardens, using locally sourced materials to rebuild sidewalks and roadways. It was all part of this larger idea I called resilient circles. As I flipped open one of the diagrams, I noticed Councilwoman Drayton lean in. She's known to be a skeptic, tight with funding, known to pick apart proposals like a bird. She didn't blink during the first 20 minutes of my talk. But then she asked me a question about scalable implementation in winter-heavy regions. I gave her a direct answer, citing not just my theoretical models, but a test site I had quietly implemented with a friend's construction firm near La Crosse. Another panelist asked about cost efficiency. Another about retrofitting sewer systems. I fielded each question calmly. By the end, one of the younger men on the city's environmental team shook my hand and said, "Iris, this is the most grounded presentation we've had this year." I felt myself exhale for the first time all day. As people packed up, I overheard two of the panelists still discussing one of my slide designs. I collected my things, thanked everyone again, and walked out. The lobby was empty now. Noelle was gone. Or so I thought. I stepped outside into the brightness of late morning, half delirious from lack of sleep and adrenaline. And there she was, sitting on the curb beside the parking meters, arms crossed, hair hanging limp around her face. She looked like she hadn't moved from that spot in hours. She didn't say anything when she saw me. Just looked. Not with anger. Not even with shame. Just, hollow. I didn't stop. I didn't break stride. I walked right past her. I could hear her get up behind me, but she didn't follow. She just said, loud enough for me to hear, "I didn't know it meant that much to you." That almost stopped me. Almost. But I got into my car, locked the door, and drove away. The next day, I had 3 missed calls from her. A couple texts too. The tone shifted from defensive to guilty to vaguely manipulative. "You didn't have to walk away like that." I messed up. But I was desperate. "You think you're better than me now, huh? I'm your sister, Iris. Blood. You can't just turn your back on that." I didn't answer. What surprised me more was when my mom called. She's always tried to stay neutral between the two of us, even when Noelle was clearly spiraling. This time, she was different. She didn't call to ask me to forgive Noelle. She didn't try to excuse her. She just asked what happened. I told her. Every word. There was silence on the line for a while. And then she sighed, deep, resigned. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have stepped in sooner." I kept hoping she'd find her way out. "She's not going to," I replied. Another long pause. "Do what you need to do, Iris. Don't look back." And that was the first time I realized my mom had finally let go too. But letting go isn't the same as healing. The whole thing left this weird numbness in me that I still haven't fully shaken off. I keep going back to that moment, her ripping the binder, the pages fluttering, and me whispering those words. "You just ruined your own life." Not out of spite. Not as a curse. Just as a fact. She thought she was punishing me. But what she really did was finally, irrevocably, show me who she is. And who she's never going to be. I've spent years holding on to the fantasy of the sister I wish I had. The one who would turn things around. Apologize. Rebuild. Be someone I could lean on the way she leaned on me. But that person doesn't exist. And she never did. I know that now. Still, the silence between us since that day is louder than I expected. And I'm not sure yet if that silence feels like freedom, or just grief in another costume. The days that followed were quiet, but not the kind of peace you savor. More like the quiet that comes after a storm when everything's soaked and nothing is where it should be. I went back to work like nothing had happened. My coworkers noticed I was more focused, more intense. Some probably assumed it was the success of the presentation. And part of it was. The panel had already sent word that they were strongly recommending my proposal to the funding board, and there was a meeting set for the following week. But under that excitement was something else. An emotional weight I couldn't quite name yet. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not my manager, not my closest friend at work, not even the HR woman who always made a point of bringing in cinnamon muffins on Mondays. I kept it all to myself, not because I was ashamed, but because explaining it out loud made it feel real. Too real. I avoided social media. I knew Noelle would be on there, either venting vaguely or trying to manipulate sympathy. She was good at that, crafting posts just vague enough that people didn't know what was true and what was fiction. The kind that ended with, "Please don't ask," but really meant, "Ask." Beg me to explain. I didn't have the energy to see it. What I wasn't prepared for was the phone call I got 3 days later. It wasn't from Noelle. It was from her oldest daughter, Lena. She's 17. A sharp girl. Smarter than most give her credit for. She and I had always had a quiet bond, especially when she was younger and would stay with me during some of Noelle's more turbulent phases. I picked up, thinking maybe she was calling about school or to ask for help with something small. But the first thing she said was, "Mom's in trouble again, isn't she?" I didn't know what to say. She wasn't crying. Her voice wasn't angry either. Just tired. That kind of tired that kids shouldn't know yet. The kind you earn from watching the people you love fall apart over and over and being powerless to stop it. She's been pacing around the house. Slamming cabinets. Screaming in the middle of the night, Lena said. Then she goes quiet and just lies there for hours. I tried asking her what happened. She said you betrayed her. That word stuck with me. Betrayed. It was almost funny. After everything, I was the traitor in her version of events. I didn't betray her, I said quietly. She made a choice. She knew what she was doing. I figured, Lena said. You wouldn't just cut her off without a reason. She didn't ask for money. Or for me to come pick her up. She just said she wanted to understand what happened. And I told her. Gently, but truthfully. I didn't try to make her mom into a villain, but I also didn't sugarcoat what she'd done. At the end of it, Lena didn't say much. She just thanked me. Then asked if she could still come stay with me for a few days during spring break, like she used to. I told her she always had a place with me. Always. That night, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the freshly bound copy of my project. It sat on the coffee table, pristine and untouched. I hadn't even flipped through it since the presentation. The pages she tore were long gone, shredded, soaked, useless. But the memory of it was still there. The sound of the paper tearing. The look on her face when she did it. And something about that memory started to shift in my mind. At first, it had been this symbol of betrayal, something violent and unforgivable. But the more I thought about it, the more it began to feel like a kind of punctuation mark. Like a final period at the end of a very long, messy, tangled sentence. Because the truth is, I'd spent years letting Noelle write in the margins of my life. Letting her chaos bleed into my plans. Her emergencies became my priorities. Her problems became my guilt. And for what? For love? For family? For loyalty? Maybe all of it. But mostly, I think, out of hope. Hope that if I just gave a little more, tried a little harder, she'd meet me halfway. But that's not how it works. You can't meet someone halfway if they don't know how to move forward at all. The following weekend, I visited a bookstore downtown. Not for anything in particular. Just to be around people, noise, something ordinary. While I was flipping through a book on landscape design, I overheard two women talking near the cafe area. They were chatting about their daughters, college choices, internships, drama with roommates. It hit me then, I had no idea what it felt like to have that kind of family support system. Not really. Not in a long, long time. And yet, I wasn't empty. I had Nadine. I had Lena. I had my coworkers. I had me. That realization landed like a slow exhale. I wasn't alone. But I was different now. It's hard to explain, but something in me has changed. Not hardened, exactly. Just clarified. Like a lens that finally got cleaned. I'm still waiting to hear back on the final decision for the project funding, but at this point, I'm not obsessing over it. It will come when it comes. What matters more is that I finally drew a line. A real one. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't apologize for drawing it. A few days later, I was leaving work when I got a voicemail from an unknown number. The voice was unmistakably familiar, it was Noelle. But something was off. Her voice didn't sound angry or desperate this time. It was slower. Calmer. But not in a comforting way. More like the kind of calm that hangs in the air before a thunderstorm. Iris. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know you embarrassed me. You humiliated me in front of my own kids. Lena's been talking back. Devin won't look me in the eye. You've poisoned them against me. Click. No apology. No accountability. Just blame. Even now. I didn't respond. I didn't save the message. I just deleted it and sat in my car for a few minutes, processing. Not because her words hurt, at least not in the way they used to, but because I finally understood how deeply she believed her own version of reality. She wasn't just lying to me. She'd been lying to herself for years. Later that night, I got a text from Lena again. She sent me a picture of a flower she'd seen growing through a crack in the sidewalk outside her school. It reminded me of your binder. Things come back stronger sometimes. I didn't cry, but my throat caught. That small, quiet message meant more to me than anything Noelle had said in years. Lena was watching. She was paying attention. And not just to the dysfunction, but to how someone chooses to respond to it. That gave me more strength than I expected. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I took a full day off from everything. No emails, no reading work notes, no trying to be productive. I got in my car and drove out toward Devil's Lake. It was still too early in the year for the usual flood of hikers, which made it perfect. I parked, laced up my boots, and started walking. The air was brisk, still carrying the last of winter in it. The trails were quiet. I passed maybe 3 other people in the first hour. As I climbed toward the overlook, I found myself thinking, not about Noelle, not about the presentation, not even about Lena. Just, myself. Who I was before all of this. Who I was trying to become again. When I reached the top, I sat on one of the boulders and looked out across the water. The surface was still. Clear. Trees just beginning to bud. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt untethered, in the best possible way. Not because I had cut Noelle off. But because I had finally stopped explaining myself for doing so. So much of our relationship had been about managing her emotions. Walking on eggshells. Prepping for the next explosion. And every time I tried to set a boundary, it was met with manipulation, guilt, or a desperate promise that never lasted. That cycle was done. I stayed up there until the sun began to drop low in the sky. Then I hiked back down slowly, step by step, no rush. Back in the car, I realized I hadn't checked my phone in 6 hours. I didn't even want to. When I got home, I made myself dinner, nothing fancy, just a vegetable stir-fry with rice and ginger tea. I turned on some music, something soft, and ate in silence. A calm kind of silence. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up the final draft of my project file. The funding board meeting was scheduled for the end of the week. I had already submitted everything, but I found myself reading through it anyway. Not editing, not tweaking, just sitting with it. Remembering how far it had come. How far I had come. There was a moment, while scrolling through a section on citywide gray water systems, that I thought of Noelle again. Not with anger. Not even sadness. Just a strange kind of distance. Like looking at an old photograph of someone you used to know but don't anymore. I wondered, briefly, where she was. If she was okay. If she'd eaten. If she still believed I was the villain. And then I closed the file, turned off the lamp, and went to bed. Sleep came easily. The week of the funding board meeting arrived, and with it came a heavy sense of anticipation, not fear, but the weight of something meaningful coming to fruition. This project wasn't just about sustainable infrastructure anymore. It had become symbolic of every decision I had made in the past few months. Every time I said no. Every time I held a boundary. Every step I took away from the person I used to be, and toward the one I had the right to become. The meeting was held in the new city administration building, modern, full of glass and light, a fitting space for a proposal built around the future. There were 7 people on the board. 3 from the city, 2 from the private environmental firm, and 2 state-level advisors. As I stepped up to present again, I didn't feel nerves. I felt clarity. I had 30 minutes, but I finished in 25. Left time for discussion. They asked detailed, serious questions. The kind that told me they had actually read every page. And at the end, one of the board members smiled and said, "Iris, this is more than a proposal. It's a blueprint for long-term transformation." The next morning, I got the call. The funding had been approved. I would be leading the pilot initiative in 2 cities, Janesville and Beloit. It was everything I'd worked for. A new job. A 6-figure contract. Full benefits. A team. And most of all, control. Over my work. Over my schedule. Over my life. But the story didn't end there. A few days later, Lena came to stay with me for her spring break, just like she had asked. We picked her up from school Friday afternoon. She brought a small duffel bag and a box of books. When we got home, she unpacked quickly, then wandered into the kitchen while I was making tea. "Mom's been telling people you stole from her," she said suddenly. I turned. "What?" "She told Grandma and Aunt May you tricked her out of some kind of inheritance. That you threatened her. She said you're bitter because you never had kids." I let out a long breath. Of course. Noelle wasn't just spiraling, she was rewriting the story. Again. But Lena wasn't finished. "I know it's not true," she said. "I just wanted you to know. She's mad because you stopped letting her make you the villain." I smiled, softly. "That's exactly right." Lena was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you think she'll ever get better?" I thought about that for a long second. Then answered truthfully. "I think she'd have to want to." That night, after Lena went to bed, I did something I hadn't planned on. I opened an old file folder I hadn't touched in over a year. It had emails, texts, receipts, years of help I had given to Noelle. Money transfers, loan confirmations, Venmo screenshots. I also had copies of messages she'd sent me over time, some kind, most manipulative. And the most recent ones, saved from my voicemail and text history, where she accused me of ruining her life. I compiled everything neatly into a PDF. Then I emailed it to 2 people, our Aunt May and my mother. The subject line was short and calm, the truth about what's been happening. No explanation. Just the file. I didn't need to defend myself anymore. Let the words speak. Let the evidence speak. The fallout came fast. Within 48 hours, Aunt May called me. She was furious, but not at me. She told me she had just confronted Noelle after reading the email. My mom, too. Turns out, Noelle had spun an entire narrative about how I had stolen family money and used it to bribe city officials to get my promotion. What she hadn't expected was that people would finally stop believing her. I don't know exactly how the confrontation went down, but I got a short message from Noelle the next day. "I hope you're proud. Everyone's turned their back on me. Congrats." No apology. No remorse. Just the familiar sting of self-pity. I didn't reply. I blocked the number, again. For good this time. The satisfying part came a few days later. I found out that one of the board members from the environmental firm, the same one who had asked thoughtful questions during my presentation, was connected to a local journalism group that featured innovation spotlights in the Midwest. They reached out. A week later, I was featured in a profile piece, Building the Future: How One Woman's Vision May Change Small-Town America. It included photos of my new pilot project teams, design blueprints, and, at my request, a brief mention of how the project had been built from scratch, even after the original was destroyed just days before final presentation. No names. No direct finger-pointing. But the people who needed to know, they knew. Noelle's circle began to shrink. Aunt May cut ties. My mom, finally, stopped defending her. Even one of her exes, Lena's father, petitioned for more custody after hearing about the incident. Lena stayed with me for most of that summer. She even joined a youth internship program connected to my project. I helped her open her first bank account, taught her how to track her spending in a simple spreadsheet, and introduced her to people who treated her with the kind of respect and care she had never consistently seen at home. One afternoon, we were walking along the lake when she looked up and said, "You're the adult I want to be like." That, more than the grant, more than the promotion, more than the newspaper article, that was the moment I knew I'd done the right thing. Not just for me, but for her. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud. It doesn't have to be cruel or dramatic or delivered with a grand gesture. Sometimes, the best revenge is healing. Succeeding without them. Living the life they told you you didn't deserve. And refusing to let their chaos become your legacy.